I learned very early that there was something wrong with me. Not wrong in the way people mean when they say it casually. Not strange, not awkward, not misunderstood. Wrong in a deeper sense. Structural. As if something essential had been assembled incorrectly and no one noticed until it was too late to fix. I did not grow up screaming. I did not grow up violent. I grew up quiet. Silence followed me like a second skin. My father liked machines. Chemicals. Bones. He showed me how things worked, how structures fit together, how the inside explained the outside. I listened carefully. Too carefully. I remember thinking that objects made more sense than people. Objects did not leave. They did not judge. They did not reject you once you understood how they were built. People were unpredictable. My mother was distant in a way I could never articulate. Not cruel. Just absent even when she was in the room. Their arguments filled the house with tension that never quite resolved. I learned to disappear into myself. To watch instead of participate. By the time they divorced, I had already learned the most important lesson of my childhood. Connection was temporary. I carried that lesson with me into adolescence. Other boys wanted to be seen. Wanted to be admired. Wanted to belong. I wanted the opposite. I wanted to disappear without being alone. I wanted closeness without risk. Control without confrontation. I did not have the language for those desires then. I only knew they existed. Alcohol came early into my life. It softened the edges of the world. It made silence tolerable. It slowed my thoughts enough that I could exist inside them without panic. Drinking did not make me violent. It made me functional. At least I believe that. When I discovered that my desires did not align with what was acceptable, I did what many people do. I hid them. I buried them. I told myself they would fade if ignored. They did not. They intensified. I do not remember a single moment where I decided to become what I became. There was no clear line, no dramatic turning point. There was only a gradual erosion of boundaries. A steady normalization of thoughts I once would have recoiled from. Fantasy became refuge. And refuge became rehearsal. Loneliness does something dangerous to the human mind when it goes untreated for too long. It distorts priorities. It rewrites morality. It convinces you that your pain is unique and therefore exempt from rules that govern others. I told myself I was different. I told myself no one would understand. I told myself that what I wanted was not harm, but permanence. That was the lie I lived inside. College did not change me. The military did not change me. Jobs came and went, each one failing not because I lacked intelligence, but because I lacked something far more important. The ability to exist among others without feeling like an observer trapped behind glass. I watched people form relationships with ease. I watched intimacy occur naturally. I watched connections dissolve and reform without catastrophe. None of it made sense to me. I wanted closeness that could not leave. That desire should have frightened me. Instead, I rationalized it. I told myself that if someone stayed, truly stayed, everything else would resolve itself. The loneliness, the anxiety, the noise in my head. I believed connection was the missing chemical that would stabilize me. I did not understand that I was trying to solve an internal problem with an external solution. And external solutions break. Milwaukee became the stage for my final transformation, though at the time it felt like just another place. Another anonymous city where people passed each other without curiosity. That anonymity fed me. It gave me room to exist without scrutiny. Bars. Conversations. Faces that blurred together after a few drinks. I learned how easy it was to be invisible. That realization was intoxicating. I am often described as a monster, but monsters are mythological. They exist outside society. I existed inside it. I paid rent. I went to work. I spoke politely. I smiled when required. No one teaches you how to recognize a person who is quietly unraveling. And I did not want to be recognized. What people never seem to understand is that control was never about dominance. It was about fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of rejection. Fear of being alone with myself. I wanted stillness. I wanted silence. I wanted a world where nothing moved unless I allowed it to. The first irreversible step did not feel dramatic. It felt inevitable. Like gravity asserting itself after years of pretending it did not exist. Once that line was crossed, the internal resistance I had relied on vanished. I remember feeling calm. That calm should have been my warning. Instead, it became reinforcement. Each time I told myself it would be the last. That I would stop. That I had proven something to myself and could now return to normal life. Normal never returned. Because normal had never truly existed for me. I lived in a compartmentalized reality. One version of me existed in public, functioning just well enough to avoid attention. Another existed privately, feeding thoughts that grew darker and more consuming with time. I did not wake up each day wanting to destroy. I woke up wanting to escape myself. Alcohol helped. Denial helped more. By the time the consequences began to circle closer, I had already convinced myself that I was beyond saving. That discovery did not make me reckless. It made me numb. Numbness is dangerous. It removes fear without removing consequence. I ignored warning signs. Police interactions that should have ended everything. Moments where intervention nearly occurred but slid past me like a misstep on a staircase. Each escape reinforced the lie that I was untouchable. I was not proud. I was not satisfied. I was empty in a way that deepened with each attempt to fill it. Eventually, the loneliness returned stronger than before because now it was accompanied by something else. The awareness that I could not stop. That awareness is what finally broke me. Not guilt. Not fear of punishment. The realization that whatever I was seeking did not exist. I was not chasing fulfillment anymore. I was chasing silence inside my own head. And silence, once you pursue it that way, demands everything. By the time the walls began to close in, by the time suspicion hardened into certainty, I was already exhausted. My body moved through routines automatically. My mind retreated inward. When they finally came for me, I did not resist. I felt relief. Relief that I would no longer have to pretend. Relief that the internal war might finally end. Relief that someone else would take control because I had proven myself incapable of doing so. Sitting in custody, stripped of anonymity, I realized something with unsettling clarity. I was never hiding from the world. I was hiding from myself. And I had lost. There is a point where secrecy stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like isolation. I crossed that point without noticing. At first, I believed I could live two separate lives. One was visible, harmless, forgettable. The other existed only in my head, carefully contained, fed only by thought. I told myself that as long as the two never touched, no real damage could occur. That belief did not survive reality. Reality has a way of pressing inward, of demanding acknowledgement. The more I tried to suppress what I was becoming, the louder it grew. Thoughts that once felt intrusive began to feel familiar. Familiarity became comfort. Comfort became dependency. I started structuring my life around avoidance. Avoiding questions. Avoiding relationships. Avoiding situations that required emotional presence. Alcohol made this easier. It dulled the friction between who I was and who I pretended to be. Drinking was not about pleasure. It was about erasure. I did not want to feel desire. I did not want to feel shame. I wanted a narrow emotional range where nothing demanded action. But desire does not disappear when ignored. It mutates. I began to isolate more deliberately. Fewer conversations. Fewer connections. I told myself I preferred it that way. That solitude was a choice. That independence was strength. In truth, I was afraid of exposure. People have a way of noticing inconsistencies when they get too close. They ask questions you are not prepared to answer. They expect reactions you cannot convincingly perform. Distance kept me safe, or so I believed. My internal world grew louder as my external world shrank. I spent long hours alone, replaying scenarios that no longer shocked me. The repetition stripped them of emotional weight. What once caused anxiety began to feel routine. That transition was subtle but irreversible. I was not chasing excitement. I was chasing control. Control over uncertainty. Over abandonment. Over the constant threat of being left alone with my own thoughts. The idea of permanence obsessed me. Not permanence in the romantic sense. Not commitment or partnership. But stillness. A state where nothing could change without my consent. Where nothing could leave. I convinced myself that this desire was about fear, not malice. That distinction mattered to me then. It allowed me to believe I was still different from what people imagine when they think of someone like me. I did not see myself as cruel. I saw myself as broken in a specific, unfixable way. Broken things, I reasoned, were not evil. They were defective. That logic sustained me longer than it should have. My living spaces reflected my internal state. Sparse. Controlled. Predictable. I needed order because my thoughts were chaotic. Every object had a place. Every routine was fixed. Disruption made me anxious. People were disruption. The city offered anonymity, but anonymity is not the same as invisibility. Eventually, patterns form. Habits repeat. Someone notices. Each close call tightened something inside me. Fear did not push me toward stopping. It pushed me toward refining. Toward minimizing risk. toward believing that intelligence could compensate for instability. I was wrong. What I was doing required emotional distance, but it also required constant attention. That contradiction exhausted me. I began to feel detached even from myself, as if I were watching my own life through a pane of glass. That dissociation became my default state. I would look at my hands and feel no connection to them. I would hear my own voice and not recognize it. Time blurred. Days collapsed into one another. I was functioning but not living. Guilt did not arrive the way people expect. There was no dramatic reckoning. No sudden moral awakening. Guilt arrived quietly in fragments. In moments of clarity that surfaced briefly, only to be pushed back down by fear and habit. I learned to avoid those moments. I told myself that stopping would change nothing. That the damage was already done. That the only rational response was to continue forward, not backward. That reasoning trapped me. The more I relied on it, the less agency I felt. I began to experience my actions as something that happened through me rather than because of me. Responsibility blurred. Choice felt theoretical. This was the most dangerous phase. Because when you stop believing you are choosing, you stop believing you can stop. People around me saw a quiet man. Polite. Withdrawn. Forgettable. No one looks twice at someone who does not demand attention. That was my camouflage. I became adept at appearing harmless. Inside I felt hollowed out. The emptiness was constant now, no longer relieved by fantasy or distraction. I was chasing something I could not define, and each attempt left me further from it. At times, I wondered if I wanted to be caught. Not consciously. But the thought surfaced more than once. A desire for interruption. For an external force to step in and end what I could not. I ignored that thought too. The thing about escalation is that it does not feel like acceleration. It feels like maintenance. Like keeping something unstable from collapsing. Each step feels necessary, justified by the one before it. By the time I realized how far I had gone, distance had lost its meaning. I was no longer managing impulses. They were managing me. And beneath everything, beneath fear, beneath denial, beneath rationalization, there was a quiet, persistent awareness that this could not continue indefinitely. Every system fails eventually, including me. The first crack did not come from outside. It came from exhaustion. I had spent years believing I could manage myself through routine and isolation. That control was never real. It was borrowed time. And eventually the debt demanded payment. I began to make mistakes. Not dramatic ones, not the kind people notice immediately. Small lapses. Forgetfulness. Overconfidence. Moments where I assumed I was invisible simply because I had been invisible before. That assumption was fatal. I underestimated the randomness of human attention. I believed patterns protected me when in fact patterns expose you. Repetition makes you predictable. Predictability invites scrutiny. I felt it before I saw it. Attention in public spaces. A sense that I was no longer moving unnoticed. That eyes lingered a second too long. That conversations carried an undercurrent I could not hear but somehow sensed. Paranoia, I told myself. I had labeled so many warning signs as paranoia that the word lost meaning. Sleep became irregular. When I did sleep, it was shallow. I woke with the feeling that something had shifted overnight. That the balance I depended on was deteriorating faster than I could correct. I started revisiting memories I had deliberately buried. Not with nostalgia. With analysis. I replayed decisions, wondering which ones had been the tipping point. Which moment had sealed the outcome. I searched for an alternate path, some version of myself who had stopped earlier, chosen differently. That version did not exist. What frightened me most was not exposure, it was clarity. Moments when the fog lifted and I could see myself without distortion. In those moments, there was no justification that held. No explanation that softened reality. Only facts. And facts are unforgiving. I realized then that I had been telling myself the same lie for years. That understanding myself somehow excused me from responsibility. That awareness was a substitute for accountability. It is not. The world does not care how well you understand your own pathology. It only cares about outcomes. I began to feel watched, not by individuals but by inevitability. As if events were aligning without my input. As if the end was approaching on a schedule already set. That sense of inevitability was strangely calming. For the first time in a long while, I stopped trying to plan. I stopped imagining how to avoid consequences. I stopped rehearsing explanations I would never be allowed to give. I simply waited. There is a specific kind of silence that comes with waiting for exposure. It is not peace. It is suspension. Like holding your breath indefinitely, knowing eventually your body will inhale whether you allow it or not. I noticed how fragile my constructed normalcy was. How easily it could collapse under a single question, a single observation, a single decision made by someone else. I had relied on indifference as a shield. But indifference is not permanent. I started to feel resentment, not toward others but toward myself, for believing I was different, smarter, more careful, less vulnerable to consequence. That arrogance had been my greatest liability. I was not exceptional. I was just unchecked. The world has a way of correcting that. When the moment finally arrived, it did not feel dramatic. There was no cinematic realization, no internal monologue announcing the end. It felt procedural, ordinary. That was the most unsettling part. The systems I had ignored, the people, the rules, the randomness, simply activated. And I was no longer in control of the sequence. I remember thinking briefly that this was what relief felt like. Not relief from guilt, relief from choice. Because once the process began, I no longer had to decide anything. The momentum carried me forward. The responsibility shifted from internal struggle to external consequence. I answered questions. I followed instructions. I observed reactions without fully engaging with them. I was present but distant. As the walls closed in, I felt something I had not felt in years. Limitation. Clear, absolute limitation. No room for reinterpretation. No ambiguity. I had spent so long existing in moral gray areas that the starkness of consequence felt almost comforting. Black and white. Right and wrong. Cause and effect. I did not feel misunderstood. I felt finally understood by reality itself. And in that understanding there was no escape. Once the process began, there was no version of myself left to protect. I had spent years constructing explanations, but explanations are useless when facts speak for themselves. Words become administrative. Questions become procedural. Your inner life becomes irrelevant. I was no longer an individual with a narrative. I was evidence. People assume confession is an emotional release, that it brings catharsis, relief, or some form of redemption. That assumption is built on the idea that guilt functions the same way in everyone. It does not. For me, confession was not a surrender. It was an acknowledgement of inevitability. The story had already concluded. I was only reciting it aloud. There was no strategic advantage in denial. No psychological benefit in resistance. The truth was no longer something I could manage internally, it existed independently of me. So I spoke. I did not dramatize. I did not justify. I described. Facts are easier to live with than interpretations. As details emerged, I became aware of something I had not anticipated. The separation between how I experienced my life and how it would be understood by others. The distance between internal logic and external judgment was vast. People wanted motives, explanations, a clear moral structure. I could not give them that. What I had was fragmentation, contradiction, long stretches of emotional absence punctuated by moments of overwhelming clarity, a pattern of avoidance that became a way of life, that does not translate well into headlines. I watched my identity shift in real time, from a person to a symbol, from a name to a shorthand for horror. Complexity flattened into narrative convenience. I was no longer allowed ambiguity. Public reaction was not something I experienced directly. It reached me filtered through reports, reactions, summaries. I became aware of outrage, fascination, disgust, fear, none of it personal, all of it intense. I understood then that the world does not want to understand people like me. It wants to contain them. And that instinct is not wrong. In confinement, time behaves differently. Without choice, without agency, days lose definition. Routine replaces intention. Reflection becomes unavoidable. There is no distraction strong enough to escape yourself when nothing else is happening. I revisited memories I had avoided for years. Not selectively. Not defensively. They surfaced without invitation. I did not analyze them. I observed them. Observation is different from justification. For the first time, I stopped asking why and started accepting that this is what I had done. That this is who I had been. That understanding did not alter responsibility. There was no revelation waiting at the end of reflection. No hidden truth that reframed everything. Only a clearer view of consequences and the permanent nature of certain choices. Some things cannot be undone. Some knowledge arrives too late to be useful. I thought often about the idea of being remembered. Not out of vanity but out of curiosity. About what remains when a person is reduced to actions. When context disappears. Legacy is not something you choose. It is something that happens to you. Mine had already been decided. I do not ask for sympathy. I do not ask for absolution. Those concepts belong to people who believe remorse alone can repair damage. It cannot. What remains is acknowledgement. Not of suffering but of fact. Not of intent but of outcome. I am not the story I told myself. I am the result of what I did. If there is anything to be learned here, it is not about monstrosity or evil as something distant and unrelatable. It is about silence, avoidance, the slow normalization of thoughts left unchallenged. The danger was never sudden. It was gradual, unremarkable. That is how it happens. I'm not asking to be understood. I'm leaving a record. Because history is not shaped only by heroes or victims, but also by witnesses. Those who saw themselves clearly only after it was too late. This is not a warning. It is a testimony. I was there. I remember. And now you do too.